Hello, I'm Jared Taylor with American Renaissance. Censors hate my videos, so if you like this one, I hope you'll send it to a lot of people. The first line of the First Amendment says this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. It says nothing about the executive, which, with the help of big media, universities, and even churches, has established what I call the American state religion. I don't mean to disparage other religions, but our official cult has all the hallmarks: faith-based beliefs, rituals, high priests, martyrs, and belief in things that are obviously false. To non-believers, it's as disconcerting as voodoo or Santeria. The main goal of the new faith is equity, or equal outcomes. This idea roared into the foreground during the 2020 presidential campaign. Kamala Harris says equal outcomes should be the goal of public policy. There's a big difference between equality and equity, she says. With equal treatment, there's no discrimination, but that's not good enough. Some people always come out ahead. With equitable treatment, we all end up in the same place. You take away the tall guy's box and give it to the short guy. Here, everyone is black. But equity isn't about taking things from black people. You take from whites, because today's inequality is their fault and they have more stuff. This year, Joe Biden signed an executive order in which he proclaimed a multi-generational commitment, a whole-of-government approach to racial equity and support for underserved communities, and to continuously embed equity in all aspects of federal decision-making. A new religion. And who are these lucky, underserved communities? Everyone who isn't a heterosexual white man. All of them, without exception, are victims of cis-patriarchal white supremacy and therefore get special treatment. Every year, every piece of the federal government will henceforth turn in an equity action plan to this lady, Shalonda Young of OMB, explaining how much equity it handed out to victims that year and how much more it will hand out next year. White people get the shaft, but it's called equity, not discrimination. On his first day in office, Mr. Biden revoked an order by Donald Trump that banned teaching government employees and subcontractors the following ideas, which I summarize. Some people, because of race or sex, whites and men obviously, are inherent oppressors. It is right to discriminate on the basis of race or sex. Only against white men, of course. People are responsible for actions committed in the past by people of the same race or sex. Guess who that would be? Meritocratic standards were set up by one race to oppress other races. Add the idea that the United States was built on white supremacy, and every social structure props it up, and you get critical race theory. Joe Biden says, yeah, teach this stuff. Just don't call it CRT. Anti-racism means discrimination. Ibram X. Kendi is one of the high priests of the cult, and his books are required reading in government. He explains, the defining question is whether the discrimination is creating equity or inequity. If discrimination is creating equity, then it is anti-racist. And therefore, it's fine. Too bad, Whitey. And how's this for messianic? One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space for not racist. Sounds like Jesus in Matthew 12, verse 30. Whoever is not with me is against me. The new religion has martyrs. George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown. They're all black because no white person can be a martyr, no matter how gruesome her death. Here's Wikipedia's list of unarmed African Americans killed by law enforcement officers in the United States. There's no list for whites. The new martyrs aren't like the Christians of old, innocent victims who accepted death because of their faith. I can't think of a single one who wasn't a criminal and who wouldn't have walked away without a scratch if he had only done what the police asked. The cult makes heroes out of criminals and gives rise to a strange ritual. congregants gather and chant, say their names, and Black Lives Matter. Legends can grow up around a saint. Michael Brown of Ferguson, Missouri, achieved sainthood on August 9, 2014, after he robbed a convenience store, tried to grab a white policeman's service weapon, charged at the officer, and was shot. The myth soon arose that he pleaded, "Don't shoot," as he meekly surrendered with his hands up, but was shot anyway. Here, shortly after the shooting, are people in St. Louis performing the hands up, don't shoot ritual. Here are black legislators performing the ritual on the floor of Congress. Just 6 months after Michael Brown's canonization, even the Washington Post was admitting that hands up, don't shoot did not happen in Ferguson, but the myth was too sweet to die. A book published 5 years later still promoted the fairy tale. National Public Radio lovingly reviewed it without one word of warning. Here are people in Barcelona, for heaven's sake, performing the hands-up ritual. And here are white people singing the incantation during a ceremony in 2020, 6 years later, for a different saint, George Floyd. Another ritual is called land acknowledgments. American Indians are really coming into their own as victims, so universities, churches, hospitals, government offices like to begin official functions with a combined profession of faith and confession. This one is typical. The University of Washington acknowledges the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations who were forced from their homelands under threat of violence. This makes white people feel really good about feeling bad about being white. The new religion has swallowed up most Christian churches. Many congregations now practice the new cult. White congregants love to genuflect. The new religion has gotten a huge, even essential boost from big media. Here's how often certain words appeared in the New York Times and Washington Post from 2011 to 2019. I wish there were more recent data, because this doesn't even include the post-George Floyd frenzy that began in 2020. Even old favorites, such as racism and racist, took off after 2017, and there's been an explosion of xenophobia and white supremacy, no doubt helped along by Donald Trump. And here's research by Zach Goldberg of the Manhattan Institute on the number of U.S. media articles that mention racism, diversity and inclusion, unconscious bias, and white privilege. Unconscious bias and white privilege were essentially undiscovered until 2010. We used to think racism required malice and deliberate acts, but we were wrong. Now we know white people are bathed in unearned privilege from birth, and that through unconscious bias they oppress people whether they mean to or not. They prop up white supremacy without even trying. The ultimate expression of white privilege and unconscious bias is white silence is violence, which you can see on the left. It is especially popular among young white women. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone else saying this particular prayer. The idea is that unless white people are actively speaking out against supposed white supremacy, they are committing violence against non-whites. They are so inherently bad, they hurt people by doing nothing. I guess white people even commit violence in their sleep. They are certainly doing it from beyond the grave, which is why all Confederate monuments must come down. The silence of the grave reminds me that most religions promise salvation. This one doesn't. Not for whites. Robin DiAngelo is another high priestess and author of the more than million-copy seller White Fragility. Anti-racist practice is an ongoing practice, says DiAngelo. You will never arrive. It is a journey, not a destination. Ibram Kendi explains, like fighting an addiction, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. It's an addiction from which white people never recover. Tema Okun is another anti-racism guru. She explains in this article, From White Racist to White Anti-Racist, The Lifelong Journey, that there are 9 stages white people have to go through to achieve true anti-racism, and that none ever becomes completely non-racist. White people will always be oppressors. In this religion, there are no blessings, only curses. This stuff about unconscious racism and violent white silence is the biggest, most baloney-fed conspiracy theory going. But as I said, faith means believing crazy things. What's the most idiotic thing all the following people have said? Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney, George H.W. Bush, General Mark Milley, General David Petraeus, General Stanley McChrystal, and thousands more. They all said publicly and loudly that diversity is our greatest strength. You have to be deep, deep into the cult to believe that diversity is a strength. But once you believe that, and that whites oppress people without even trying, you're ready to believe just about anything, aren't you? There is no telling how bad it will get. Fortunately, opposition is growing. And I will leave you with the closest thing the cult has to a benediction. Hate has no home here. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this video channel. You might also give this video a thumbs up. I invite you to visit amren.com, amren.com. You'll find videos, podcasts, articles, a lot of things that I think will interest you. But again, thank you so much for watching.